I'm going to come.
But this is the thing, because everyone has got their own ideas and everyone's got an opinion, haven't they? And you've seen the memes. The fact that Victoria's now become a meme, it's actually probably quite distressing, because like no one really knows exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But you was actually there.
Yeah.
For decades, the Beckham family didn't just represent success. They represented a machine. We're not talking about the messy, relatable kind of family drama you see on reality TV.
What the are you talking about?
We're talking about a polished, untouchable unit that seemed engineered to never fail.
Woof.
Every smile you saw in the press looked intentional. Every public outing felt like a strategic move. And every time they stepped out together, they reinforced the same message: absolutely nothing cracks brand Beckham.
Oh my God.
But here's the thing about families like that: they don't usually blow up loudly. They fracture quietly, slowly. And sometimes, all it takes is one wrong moment in front of the wrong people for the whole illusion to unravel. When Brooklyn Beckham married Nicola, the world was ready for the fairy tale finale. You know the drill: lavish setting, A-list guests, the perfect happily ever after. But instead of a victory lap, what actually went down behind closed doors kicked off one of the most uncomfortable celebrity rifts we've seen in years. You've seen the headlines, you've heard the rumors, you've probably even seen Brooklyn trying to explain it. But until recently, nobody from inside that room had really explained what shifted the energy that night. That changed when DJ Fat Tony finally spoke up. And honestly, his take didn't just add details, it completely reframed the story. Because according to him, this wasn't about jealousy, it wasn't about tradition, and it definitely wasn't just about a harmless dance.
Yes, I was the DJ at the wedding. It wasn't a one-day wedding, it was a 3-day wedding. I did the welcome party, then I did the wedding, and then I did a brunch on the Sunday, which was the most awkward part of it all, because everything that had gone on the actual wedding night was discussed amongst all the guests the next morning.
According to someone who actually knows how these elite weddings work, that moment carried a weight heavy enough to sink the whole evening. It exposed power dynamics that were never meant to be seen. It crossed boundaries that shouldn't have been touched. And it quietly confirmed fears Brooklyn had probably been carrying around for years. What was supposed to be a celebration turned into something deeply awkward. And the second that music started playing, Brooklyn didn't just lose a moment, he lost the illusion that this day was ever actually his. But to really get why one single dance hit so hard, you have to understand the pressure cooker Brooklyn walked into and why this wedding was never just a wedding. This event carried a level of expectation that most of us will never have to deal with. From the outside, sure, it looked like a celebration of love, but from the inside, it functioned more like a high-stakes summit where symbolism mattered way more than feelings. Every decision was loaded: the seating arrangements, the speeches, who stood where. In these circles, weddings aren't just milestones, they're statements. And for Brooklyn, this one came with a specific kind of pressure he'd felt his whole life but rarely talked about. He wasn't just showing up as a groom, he was stepping into a spotlight shaped by legacy, scrutiny, and public judgment. Friends later mentioned how carefully he seemed to be navigating the room, constantly checking the temperature, hyper-aware of how every interaction might look to the cameras. That hyper-awareness isn't arrogance, it's training. When you grow up inside a family that is also a global corporation, you learn early on that nothing is truly private, even when the paparazzi aren't around. Brooklyn had spent years trying to carve out his own lane, bouncing between careers and interests, trying to find some distance. This wedding was supposed to be the turning point, a clean break, not an escape exactly, but a declaration of independence. But you could see the tension before the night even really got going. Conversations felt measured, smiles felt practiced. There was this underlying vibe that control was still totally out of his hands. When image management is your first language, even joy can feel supervised. Brooklyn wasn't looking for a rebellion that night. He was just looking for ownership. And that is exactly why what happened next felt so destabilizing. Because when a moment meant to symbolize your independence starts slipping away, it doesn't feel like embarrassment. It feels like confirmation. And the room was about to deliver that message loud and clear. The shift happened fast. The music swelled, the room got quiet, and suddenly, all eyes went to the stage.
This is what happened, guys, right? So basically, Mark Anthony was performing on stage. He then called Brooklyn onto stage. Brooklyn went onto the stage where the next minute, everyone was expecting it to be Nicola to go up and do the first dance. Mark Anthony asks the most beautifulest woman in the room to come to the stage. And then he says, Victoria, come to the stage. So Victoria's by the stage, she goes onto the stage. And of course, at that point, Brooklyn's like suddenly literally devastated because he thought he was going to do his first dance with his wife.
Mark Anthony, a guy known for grand romantic gestures, took the mic. To most of the guests, it probably felt like a generous surprise. But to Brooklyn, it carried a very specific meaning. Being called up in that setting usually implies something intimate, a handoff to the newlyweds. As he stepped up, the expectations locked in. Then the vibe tilted. Instead of inviting Nicola to join him, Mark Anthony called Victoria Beckham forward. The room hesitated. Time felt like it stopped. What happened next was too fast to interrupt, but way too slow to ignore. Instructions were given. Hands were placed. The dance became physical in a way that felt jarring, not celebratory. Guests were glancing at each other, trying to figure out if they should clap or look away. Nicola was left standing off to the side, watching a moment she thought was hers just vanish in real time. The issue wasn't the choreography, it was the context. In a space designed to honor a new partnership, the focus got aggressively pulled back to the old hierarchy.
Then Nicola leaves the room crying her eyes out. Brooklyn's stuck there on stage, and then they do this dance, and Mark Anthony's like, go, put your hands on your mother's hips. You know, it's a Latin thing, and the whole situation was really awkward for everyone in the room.
Brooklyn's body language told the whole story. He looked stiff, restrained, visibly conflicted. This wasn't a son having a sweet moment with his mom in private. It was a public display unfolding under the weight of expectation. No one stopped it because honestly, no one knew how. Elite environments train people to avoid a scene, even when the air is thick with discomfort. And as the music kept playing, the emotional costs started piling up. Because once a boundary gets crossed in front of a room full of witnesses, you can't undo it. The weight of that realization landed on everyone before the song even finished. What made that moment stick wasn't the spectacle, it was the message. On the surface, people tried to brush it off as harmless tradition or just moms being moms. But emotionally, it hit bone. For Brooklyn, this wasn't about sharing the spotlight. It was about watching a boundary dissolve during the one moment that was supposed to define his future. Weddings are symbolic. They mark the transfer of loyalty from your parents to your partner. When that symbolism gets hijacked, it feels like a message delivered without words.
The last 4 years, he's been Nepo baby. All of his life, he's been called Nepo baby. Oh, he should be grateful that he's got the family name. You can't, that's what he was born into. You know, I think what we're all missing here is the fact that parents have lost their child, their son, and the son's lost his parents and the rest of his family.
Standing there, Brooklyn wasn't just reacting to a song. He was processing what the moment represented, that even now, even here, his role could be redirected without his consent. That realization stings, especially for someone who spent years being told where to stand, how to present, and when to speak. Moments like this don't feel dramatic in the instant. They feel clarifying. They expose patterns you've learned to tolerate without naming. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. Observers said there was a noticeable change in Brooklyn after that dance. He didn't get angry. He withdrew. It was a kind of emotional closing of the shop. When people hit that point, they stop arguing. They stop negotiating. They start reassessing. And reassessment is dangerous in families built on expectation rather than real talk. The weight of that night didn't come from embarrassment. It came from recognition. Recognition that the dynamics hadn't changed, even if Brooklyn had. The aftermath didn't arrive with shouting matches or big confrontations. It arrived as absence. The morning after the wedding felt off. Conversations were quiet. The energy was weirdly uneven. Some guests just didn't show up for the post-wedding brunch, offering polite excuses to avoid the awkwardness. In private, the night before became the thing everyone was thinking about, but nobody was saying. This wasn't just gossip. It was genuine confusion.
People make their own presumptions about everything.
But there's nothing you can do about it.
No, you can't. And you know, the reason why I've decided to come on this morning, because it's a safe space. I've been inundated with, you're a liar, you're this, you're that, and I haven't even commented. My poor husband was in an argument.
He made a comment, didn't he?
He made a brief comment saying, you weren't there, I was, it's true, on about the inappropriate dance. It's ridiculous.
People struggled to reconcile how elegant the event looked with the emotional fracture they could feel underneath it. Usually, wedding celebrations spill over into the next day with this warm, fuzzy glow. This one stalled out. That warmth was replaced by caution. Those closest to the situation noticed a clear distance forming, specifically around Brooklyn and Nicola. It wasn't hostility, it was detachment. When moments that should bring you closer actually introduce tension, you see it in the small things. Missed eye contact, shorter conversations, early exits. No official explanation was offered because none was needed. Everyone there felt it. And in these elite circles, shared discomfort often turns into a silent agreement to just move on. But that lack of acknowledgement created its own weight. Without a space to talk about what happened, the emotions just stayed suspended in the air, and unresolved moments don't fade. They settle into memory. By the time the weekend wrapped, something essential had shifted. The wedding was over, but the emotional impact hung around, not as drama, but as distance. And once distance becomes your new normal, reconnecting gets a lot harder than you'd think. As the public looked for a villain, the target inevitably landed on Nicola. That's predictable. Outsiders always get blamed when long-standing family dynamics finally bubble over. But framing her as the problem misses the point entirely. What Nicola introduced into Brooklyn's life wasn't division, it was contrast. A different way of doing things. A version of family life that didn't require constant PR management.
She comes from a very wealthy family, so I don't think she cares about
about her husband's money, her in-laws' fame. And this may be part of the problem.
For someone raised in a world where image is everything, that contrast is destabilizing at first, but then it's revealing. Being close to the Peltz family gave Brooklyn a reference point he never really had before. Privacy that wasn't strategic, affection that wasn't for the cameras, and boundaries that didn't need a press release to explain. Over time, seeing that difference changes your expectations. Not because someone is whispering in your ear, but because you're finally seeing an alternative. That's why the control narrative took off. Not because Nicola demanded he cut ties, but because Brooklyn started realizing how much he had normalized. Even small decisions took on new weight. Changing how he presented himself publicly felt less like rebellion and more like alignment with who he actually wanted to be. Identity, when you choose it for yourself, tends to rattle systems built on consistency. So when the system felt threatened, it looked for a source. Nicola became that source in the press because she represented change. But in reality, she didn't pull him away. She just stood next to him while he figured out what closeness should actually feel like. And once you start asking those questions, going back to the old way becomes emotionally expensive.
These are weird poses for a mum and son. So many celebrities use their sons inappropriately.
You can't unknow what you know. What followed publicly was quiet, no statements, no interviews, no clapping back. For a family that usually lives in the media, that silence felt deliberate. Some people called it avoidance, others called it a masterclass in strategy. But within families shaped by decades of exposure, staying quiet serves two purposes. First, speaking risks making it worse. Second, emotion, once it's out there, is impossible to put back in the box. Choosing not to engage might have been an attempt to keep a lid on it, to preserve some space where maybe eventually they could fix it. But silence also creates a void, and without acknowledgement, narratives fill that void. Viewers interpreted the silence as dismissal and the distance as disapproval. That disconnect widened the gap between what was happening and what people thought was happening. For parents used to controlling the story, losing the narrative must have felt terrifying, but responding would have meant admitting there was a conflict to begin with. So the choice to stay quiet might have been protective, or maybe it was just paralyzing. Either way, it changed how the story unfolded, because silence doesn't freeze time, it lets time rewrite the meaning. And as weeks turned into months without a fix, the distance became the story, rather than just a pause in the middle of it. Despite how final it all looked from the outside, family endings are rarely absolute. Distance can feel permanent, while still leaving a door cracked open. Sources suggest the lines of communication were never fully cut, just quieted down. When emotions are this high, separation acts as a buffer, not a period at the end of the sentence.
Everyone was talking about how sad that part of it was. But I think the whole situation was thrown in. Victoria was thrown into it.
Yeah.
And of course, there's too many stories being added to it. And I think that dance is a very small part of the bigger problem.
In this case, patience was self-preservation. Trying to fix it too early risks ripping the wound back open. That's why mediation was quietly floated, not to assign blame, but to get people talking without the pressure. Rebuilding trust doesn't start with, "I'm sorry." It starts with, "I see you." And acknowledgement needs silence to work first. Public perception demands closure, but real relationships move on a messy timeline. Healing isn't a straight line, especially when identity and loyalty are tangled up in it. Brooklyn's choices since the wedding look more like reflection than rejection. Choosing distance doesn't always mean you're abandoning your family. Sometimes it's the only way to redefine the relationship on your own terms. Whether they fix this depends less on that one dance and more on whether expectations can evolve. Families rooted in tradition struggle the most when members outgrow their assigned roles. But growth doesn't have to kill connection. It tests it. And tests, if you meet them with patience instead of ego, can actually strengthen what's left. When stories like this blow up, our instinct is to pick a team, to decide who's the villain and who's the victim. But family fractures are never that simple. What looks like one dramatic moment is usually the result of years of pressure and unspoken rules colliding at the worst possible time. This wasn't just about a wedding or a dance. It was about what happens when someone raised inside a powerful system starts questioning the handbook. And if this story feels strangely familiar, there's a reason. We've seen this exact pattern before. A public figure steps away from the legacy only to be labeled ungrateful, difficult, or controlled by their partner. The backlash follows a script. Admiration turns to resentment. Independence gets spun as betrayal. And the person at the center becomes the target. If you want to understand why that reaction keeps repeating and how it played out almost identically in another famous British family, you need to watch the video linked on your screen right now. It breaks down the spare dynamic in a way most coverage ignores, and it might change how you see these headlines entirely. This is Star Spotlight, where we strip the fame of the illusion. Thanks for watching.